Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the CEO Next Door. My name is Donovan. I'm a co-host on the CEO Next Door. Joining me, like every week, is Mike Mayer, and today our guest, Chris Joyce, CEO and founder of Gusher. Chris, it's great to have you. Excited to have you on today. Maybe we can just kick things off with you providing a little bit of background on yourself and what you're currently working on, and then we can get into the meat of it.
Well, sure. Thanks for having me, guys. I definitely like being here. Let's have a great conversation. But as for background will get really long, so I'm just going to say this, okay? I've had 24 companies in terms of startups in almost every industry, every vertical. Started companies at a very, very young age. I've had everything from consumer goods, medical devices, manufacturing, SaaS, fintech, all different types of companies all across the globe. I've got users of my tech products in 150 plus countries. I've had my retail products sold in more than 23 countries in terms of consumer goods. So I know the ins and outs of startups, and my most current venture is Gusher.
Awesome. Wow. You've truly been all over and done everything.
Something like that.
So
all over. I mean, it started out in Ohio, so I'm a little ways from Ohio and doing all that stuff. Absolutely.
So where did it all start?
Okay, it started, and I'm not joking about this. It started from reading a comic book. It was a Spider-Man comic book, and in the back of it was this, the little classifieds they had at the time. They still might, I don't know. And there was an ad for you send $5 in, and you get this box of burpee seeds, like seeds for flowers, seeds for cucumbers, for whatever, watermelon, whatever it may be. And you would sell these packets of seeds for $1. And that's the way was the first business opportunity, the first business that I actually did. So I went door to door knocking on doors at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland at the time. And I made a good $50, or I should say I grossed $50 on a $5 investment. And from that time I was hooked. I loved business and I loved doing it. And that led to a lot of other things.
And this was you were, how old were you when you did this?
6 years old. I was 6 years old knocking on doors.
Well,
and that's a good thing. It teaches you a lot of lessons. You see, you experience all of humanity when you knock on doors. Everything from the good, the bad, to, the charity, to just, people that really actually listen to the pitch, even at the age of 6.
I would hope most people would be kind to a 6-year-old.
You would hope, but and on Air Force bases, it's probably even a better population, meaning that they have to kind of be kind. But, you don't know what people are experiencing on the other side of that door. So they may be the greatest people in the world, but they may have had somebody, you don't know, just die, or they may be having a stressful situation, or you never know what. So there were slams in the face. There were, gruff, not interested, and that type of thing. But there was really a lot of time. Most people didn't answer the door. Most people weren't there. So, that taught another good lesson in terms of just hanging in there during the dead times, because that's the vast majority of sales and starting a business.
So how long, as a 6-year-old entrepreneur, how long did you have that business? And then where did you go from there?
Sure. I mean, as a 6-year-old, who knows? I mean, I maybe had that a couple weekends and made that type of money. And then I started businesses all as a kid, all the standard type of stuff. But, I remember I came up with an idea for a new type of car brake when I was in 4th grade, 9 years old.
Wow.
And my stepfather at the time was an electrical engineer. And I literally went ahead and took that idea to him, presented the idea to him. My mom said to talk to him. And just like any type of engineer, they don't get paid to create companies, by the way. Just like any engineer, usually, they're very extremely rigid in thought and process because they're brought up a certain way in terms of their education. So why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing it up because he shit all over that idea. He crapped it into the tank, and taking that massive rejection when you're 9 years old was a damn good thing. I mean, I'm literally getting goosebumps again thinking about it, because at the time, I basically told him to F off, and that I was right, and that I was going to go ahead and do it, and stuck to my guns. And that's really the one thing I learned is that, you don't kill these ideas, even if they're bad. Looking back at a 9-year-old originating idea, even if it was bad, you try to encourage that because those bad ideas lead to good ideas. The path to good or great ideas is the crappy ideas, is the absolutely horrifically bad ideas. But the only way you get better is by doing them and by seeing that they're bad and by pursuing those bad ideas. And so as an entrepreneurial lesson, that again was something that was extremely important to my foundation at a very early age. I remember every last word that was spoken to this day, and it was not nice.
Along those lines, though, at some point you need to realize as you're building a business and you're running it that, it's not a good idea. How do you identify that tipping point to say, okay, we're done, we're shutting it down, selling it, I'm out, moving on to something?
I don't necessarily agree with that. So let me give you an example. All right. What it comes down to is the following. A person typically or a potential founders ask me, like, how do you know that you have a good idea? And I don't necessarily think it's a result of market validation. I don't think it's a result of really listening to people in customer surveys. I don't think it's a result necessarily of research. And this is going to circle back as an answer, okay? I think it's literally more fundamental than that. You should be pursuing an idea. It doesn't mean it's going to be great. It doesn't mean it's going to be awesome. It doesn't mean that it's going to be, some billion-dollar thing. I think you should listen to your internal voice that when you think about that idea, if you smile, that is the most simple way of knowing whether or not you should be doing something. So not necessarily even in business, it can be anything in life. But if you're thinking of a business idea, and again, you're getting goosebumps as you're thinking about that idea, that typically is the best indicator, the best green flag that that's the path to doing it. So flash forward now, you're a year into it. This idea is not going where you need it to go. It's not succeeding. People are not joining it. People are not whatever. Do you go ahead and quit? I typically say no. The decision was already made. What you should be doing is massively iterating. You should be going ahead and massively changing the context maybe of what you're doing. What you should be doing is changing the voice, the marketing, the branding. What you should be doing is pivoting a tiny bit with maybe that product idea and seeing where that leads. So in other words, you may have failed at that original idea, but maybe that original idea wasn't the complete idea. Maybe that idea was just a part of that machine that was to be built. Maybe that idea really was a lead-in for what you should be doing, and you should be listening to yourself as that. So yeah, there are people that are married to, hey, I got this patent and this is exactly what it is and I'm going to do it. And I've seen 99.999% of those types of founders fail because they don't listen at all to the market. They're just sold on that creation. But the creation of a product is not the creation of a business. Creation of a business is something that's a little bit different. And that's what I mean when I say that, hey, you should be listening to that internal voice as a guiding mechanism.
Chris, I think it would be helpful to maybe hear an example of this. Have you had this experience in any, whether it's back to the break idea in 4th grade or any of your other businesses where you continued to feel passion for an idea or for a business concept, but got to a point where maybe it wasn't clicking along like you hoped it would be? And then how did you make the decision to iterate, and maybe talk us through what that process looks like? Because that you always hear founders and investors relay, you need to be open and willing to pivot. But I don't think we hear as many stories about what that actually looks like in practice. Can you provide any insight into that?
Sure. Well, pivot, yes, I will. Okay. But I want to explain one thing. So pivot and evolving are kind of two different things. Okay. So let me give you an example. So one of my biggest companies ended up being a company called Oh So Low Foods. I started it with absolutely nothing, and it turned into the largest low carbohydrate food manufacturer in the world. It was gargantuan. Okay. So one day, and I was basically penniless. This is true. I'm in Pennsylvania. I moved from Los Angeles to Pennsylvania. I followed love and all that. And I'm sitting there selling the remnants of my office furniture, trying to start another software company, when I just woke up and I wanted a low carb blueberry muffin. Now, why did I want a low-carb blueberry muffin? Because I had been on a diet for years where all I was eating was bacon and eggs and every form of fat and meat you could eat, and I just wanted a goddamn low-carb blueberry muffin, all right? So I started farting around with the product. I started trying all these different recipes, putting stuff together. It wasn't like now where you could find certain recipes very easily. There was nothing on the market at all, zero. And so I started going ahead and said, hey, I gave up after a while and I couldn't create the product. So I started trying to hunt down food chemists. So watch what happens here. So I start contacting all these food chemists. One after another tells me it couldn't be done. It shouldn't be done. It wouldn't be done. Why are you doing this? They cursed at me. I'm talking like PhDs. I'm talking like real phenomenal food chemists at what they do, all right? Because the trend wasn't there. The science wasn't there supporting it. So they're all negative and everything else. So at that point in time, I could have easily said, F it. You know, obviously everything's against it. The market isn't warm. The market isn't there. But again, I had that experience when I was 9 years old. All right. So I sat there and I said, this is just the path. This is the path to it. The more no's that they're saying right there, I knew that that would eventually get me there. I knew that the more no's and everything else that people were telling me it couldn't be done, the bigger the market. Okay, this is leading again, Mike, to really your question in another way. So I'm sitting there, we're creating this company, and we create finally these low-carb blueberry muffins. I found the chemist that said yes and helped me out after literally 500 food chemists told me to F off in some way, shape, or fashion. So 3 months later, yeah, it was about 90 days, I had on my doorstep a low-carb blueberry muffin that had been FedExed to me, and I was like, F and A. We've got a business, all right? Now, was this product good? Not really. Was this product taste phenomenal? Not really. But did this product have 2 grams of carbohydrates for a really big muffin that had the texture of a muffin? Hell yeah. So I knew right off the bat that that would attract a certain group of zealots, a certain type of low carbers that would then be able to fund the additional growth. So we start sitting there and we start putting it out, and I'm sleeping on a factory floor for almost 2 years. I mean, almost getting no sales whatsoever. I mean, 0 sales. So did I have an opportunity then when I could have said, yeah, you know, let's go ahead and quit? It's not growing. It's kind of paying for itself. It's doing whatever. I could have kicked it right there. I could have said, end it. You know, we have no way to create what I really wanted, which was bread, a shelf-stable bread. But, you know, we kept going ahead with the blueberry muffin and a couple other muffins and whatever else. And so at each stage, it was another iteration. It was another step. It was another generation of product, of packaging, of shelf stability. After 4 years, yeah, we hit the home run, and suddenly we had shelf-stable, low-carb bread. But after that were all these times when I could have given up, were all these times when I could have said F it, were all these times when the market really didn't look like it, were all these times when the evolution was actually taking place, but I could have stopped it at any time. All those times for years were ugly, horrible times. It's what I call the furnace. You go through that furnace and you come out the other side, and either you accepted it and you turned to ash, or you went ahead and got turned to something stronger and something better. So I get the whole point of that. Hey, there comes a time when you say an idea is bad, but not necessarily. It's an evolutionary process, not necessarily a pivot. So that frozen product, that shelf-stable product made everything insanely better. Suddenly we were in 20,000 stores and growing and everything else, and took off like a rocket within a year.
What is that still being sold, and what's the brand name that people might recognize?
Well, it was Osolo Foods. I got that in like 2005. So that was quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
So very much understand and appreciate that story and that sentiment. But
sure,
is there ever a time when someone should call it quits and should say enough is enough, and kind of say, well, this experience will inform something that I do in the future, but how do you know?
Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of one I killed. Okay. So I had a company in New York City. I was approximately 21, 22 at the time. And I had formed a business brokerage. Now, the reason I had formed the business brokerage was there was this gentleman named Tom West who founded VR Business Brokers. He had this huge franchise operation, sold 200 units, everything else. He was all across the country. He retired. And I had a new concept for this business brokerage. We went ahead and put it together. We launched it in New York City. We started taking over the market. We had almost dominated the entire New York market in less than a year, and it was growing, growing, growing. But there was one thing it didn't accomplish, okay? It couldn't be a standalone system, meaning that I personally had to be involved in every last sale in order for it to go ahead and close. So it was very difficult to standardize business sales like real estate. So real estate it is. There's certain different things there that you can quantify, you can qualify, you can standardize the sale, and a person at a basic level can still go ahead and do the closings and get the deal done. Businesses, not so. And so at that point in time, I had a business that was generating phenomenal money. It was golden handcuffs. And I purposely put a bullet in that business's head and said, you know what? It's not doing what I set out to do. I'm going to be trapped here in terms of with this business for the rest of my life. And so let's get the hell out and go on to the next business. That's a cold, fast example, I think, of what you're looking for. But it can also go the other way, where you're not making a damn thing and it's not doing whatever. If you're not making any progress, it seems like you're in a catch-22, which I fundamentally don't believe in, then maybe you would go ahead and stop it. But again, it comes down to whether or not you can live with yourself doing that. Most times with a business, I can't live with myself doing that unless I've tried every possible iteration.
So when you're identifying attributes, when you're analyzing a concept to build a new business, it sounds like scalability is probably at the top of your list, that you don't need to be golden handcuffed into the business. What are the other attributes that you're looking for in that business concept before you take it to the next level?
For me personally, I really do. I need to, I know it's going to sound crazy and maybe it's inappropriate. I need to get off on it. There are certain businesses that I love doing them for a certain period of time. I mean, I don't like doing something that somebody else has done. That's number one. So if I'm going to do it, it's got to be a new concept, a new variation, a new something or other that's being done. So for me personally, I don't like it where somebody else has done it. That's definitely condition number one. Number two, it's got to be something that, as you said, is scalable, but something that's going to impact people's lives in a really phenomenal way. The older that I get, that's changed to be almost everything. So in the beginning stage, you could say, yeah, business sales, if I had a business brokerage, it helps people out, it does a service, it does whatever. But now I look for businesses that have impact or ripple effect across many areas or across as many people as possible. So I look now really for what I call the untapping of human potential. That to me is really almost the greatest thing that you can do as a business person, because in effect, you end up helping people to get to where they need to go, which becomes a self-propagating system. So for me, that's really it. That's what I look for. I don't look for consumer goods necessarily or manufacturing or whatever it may be. It's really about human potential.
When you are not following and leading and creating totally new concepts, you have a challenge of creating a market, educating people. How do you do that? That is one of the toughest things. It's easy to be the second or third guy to be like, I'm just like them. But when you are brand new and people don't know they even need you, how do you publicize? How do you get that message out?
Yep. It's actually pretty easy, okay? And I'm going to say something that's not going to make sense unless you've done it or do it, okay? The unscalable stuff leads to the scalable stuff. What do I mean by that? The unscalable stuff leads to the scalable stuff. That means that there's certain things, what I call the shit, that a person has to do as a founder. And in the beginning, it's usually shit. I call it shit for a reason, because you're not going to want to do it. It's not something that is scalable. It's not something that will go ahead and be a model that you can grow and do whatever, but it leads to the next stage. Okay. So what do I mean by that? I mean, you personally have to talk to a hell of a lot of people almost all the time. You have to be a zealot for that business. Doesn't cost you anything. It's something you have to do. So every person that you run into, you've got to find some way to go ahead and talk to them and see if there's something there from a business standpoint. Any customers that you originate, what I call the VIM, the vested interest market, the people that have the most to gain from the success or failure of your potential company, what you're creating, you need to talk with them. You need to, more importantly, physically meet with them. Why do you physically have to meet with them? Because when you're actually with somebody, that emotional connection, the authenticity is a hell of a lot more than even what we're doing now. And as a human being, we're wired for it. So you pick up real data points that are not measurable, but you pick up the emotions, the true interest, the whatever it may be. Now, the other thing is also sales validation. At this point in time, when you're starting out a company, the main point should be testing the sale of it. Well, how the hell do you do that? Well, you do it in the beginning stage by testing out your pitches. What are these short, brief snippets to explain what your company does? You know, in the beginning with Oh So Low and low carb, I'd be talking about low carb and a low carb business and low carb muffins and whatever it is. Well, if a person wasn't on a low carb diet, it was like hitting my head against cinder blocks. It wouldn't go anywhere. But if a person was on a low carb diet, if they were a diabetic, if their wife or spouse was on a low carb diet, I would start a sentence. They would finish my sentence. It was like hot knife through warm butter. So what you learn is a couple things. You learn who your market is very specifically. You learn how to talk to that market very specifically. And so once you start doing that in the beginning stage, without even a product, what it enables you to do is to craft your product, to craft your business with those people in mind. And when you have those people in mind, by talking to them, by meeting with them, by interacting with them physically, that results in a better product that then has market viability, that already has the ability to go ahead and generate sales. The other thing is you need to generate a warm market from the beginning. How do you do that? You have different things on Instagram. You have different things on TikTok. You have Facebook, LinkedIn. Now, most of the times you're going to post to a vacuum, okay? You're going to post something, it doesn't do anything. But what you're able to do, though, if you're a little bit sharp, is you start triangulating. You start triangulating their backgrounds or interests, whatever it may be, and those one or two people that follow what you do, you start seeing what do they have in common? How do I expand upon that? You talk to them. Is there anything they have in common and do? So for example, with Gusher, our founders, our people that I was speaking with, well, the only thing I could find in common with them is that the successful ones were really, really honest. I mean, like honest to a fault, like it was their religion. So then I had a marketing person that said to me, I bet they're all X. And I go, BS. There's no way they can have this all in common. And I'll tell you what it is in a second. But I start making the phone calls. I'm calling up all these founders. I'm not calling them, but I'm doing video calls like now. And so we start talking about their backgrounds, what they do. And sure enough, even though these people are from every part of the world, all different ethnicities, religions, all different income, educational backgrounds, they had a 95% correlation. And because of that, we're now able to expand a certain way. So what was it? They all share an extreme sports background. So we have people that have been on all different types of Olympic teams. We have professional MMA fighters, professional surfers, Division I soccer players, football players, whatever it may be, all these different athletes, but yet they're all across the spectrum, but they share that in common, which was kind of unique.
Seems random. Crazy.
It does, but digging and talking is what generated that information. You know, that is now scalable.
So, Chris, that's probably a good segue. Can you just give a quick background on what Gusher is so our listeners understand what you're currently working on?
Sure. Gusher is a platform to launch companies without the need for capital, without the need for investors. So what happens is people apply to join your company in exchange for performance-based equity. Nobody gets a thing in your company unless the company is able to achieve its objectives, including us. So we're all success-based players. So what I say to founders is, imagine that you had $1 million or $2 million in the bank account right this second. What type of company would you build? How would you build it? And then Gusher that, because we do it all day, every day. Everything from B2B, B2C, B2B2C, and everything in between. From consumer goods, manufacturing, SaaS, fintech, AR, VR, AI, gaming, medical device, prop tech, you name it, we've got it. But more importantly, we've got greater than an 80% success rate where these companies become self-sustaining and or attract larger scale capital. And that's unbeatable.
Interesting. Wow. So where does the initial capital come? You said no investors, so I'm curious where you need some money to start a business.
No, you don't. Listen to me. I'm going to say a statement that you won't believe, and you don't believe it until you actually do it. You don't need money until about 10 million in sales level. So you say, well, I've already got 10 million in sales. Why do I need money? Well, the only thing you need money for if you're at that level is for what's called land grabs, or for the ability to expand and take over an entire market or the biggest portion of a market. But to be able to get to 10 million sales, I don't care what type of company it is, you don't need a penny other than to maybe incorporate or something like that. But that's it. So everything that you need right now is held by somebody else. All it is convincing and persuading them that what you are working on is valid, that it has value, and that it actually they should come in some way for performance-based equity. And that's the biggest test on Gusher right off the bat. Are you able to get one person, only one person, for performance-based equity? Because if you can, that deal is done. We have a saying on Gusher: 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 equals done. If a founder is able to recruit one person into their company, those are the 80% that go on to succeed. Those are the ones that are able to develop the product or whatever it may be, launch into the marketplace, become self-sustaining, and those are the companies that are able to get investors down the road if they need it. But it comes down from talking with people and honing down what you're saying into a pitch that's understandable, that's relatable, and you find out very quickly whether or not that company should be pursued.
What are the types of roles that these entrepreneurs are looking for to bring on in that performance-based capacity?
Sure. Well, if it's a tech company or a software-based company, it always follows the same pattern. So you have CTO, Chief Technology Officer, front-end, back-end, UI, UX developers. Then you end up scaling over to marketing, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, Creative Director, maybe something for social media director or manager. But then you also go into other stuff like biz dev, depending upon the type of company. If they need something like a CFO that's not a transactional Chief Financial Officer, but is a rainmaker CFO to help bring on investors at later stages. But it really, typically the average team is about 8 to 12 people that starts on Gusher to get the product out the door.
When did you start?
If it's a consumer goods company, it could be anything from the material scientist, the actual formulator. If it's something like, here's one of our companies that's creating, whatever the oat-based energy drink is, sustainable grain. If it's a dog food company, obviously you have different types of people that are involved with that, but it just depends on what you're actually creating. But the key there is that your team has to be vested interest market. They have to be people that really understand what you do. So with something like Altai Dog Food, which is Happy Howl on our platform, well, every last person on his team, and this is a year and a half later, this company's growing 10 million, doing 30% month-over-month growth. Every person on his team is a dog owner. They get it. So it's not like he's convincing and persuading them. They understand that market. His first team failed miserably and they imploded 6 weeks later. Second team took off like a rocket.
When did you start the business? And since you've started it, can you talk about like your number one success story with one of the companies?
Yeah, sure. So we started actually a couple of years ago, but we did it in stages. So we put Gusher out. First version just was basically a tool to see if the concept could be taught and shown. That's what our alpha version. We had that out there, took off like a rocket. We pulled it down. It took us about a year and a half to get the legal framework built, get all approvals, everything else from states and feds and everything else. That then came out, and now we're in our beta version, which we have more than 300 companies growing, 80% success rate. Some of our biggest companies are Security in Motion. They make a type of portable security device. We just have O Company, which is taking off like a rocket right now. They're actually a mobile server device that's more hardware driven. We have Altai Dog Food, Happy Howl. They've got a valuation of more than 10 million. And as I said, growing 35% month over month. That can I just showed you was Sustainable Grain. Sustainable Grain is their brand name is Pharmalogical. They create a line of oat-based energy drinks, and they're taking off like a rocket. So we've actually got now at the stage where we're having a lot of successes that you actually can see and verify and do all that.
So, and go ahead, Donovan.
I was going to ask Chris, going back to something from a little bit earlier that you said, one of the main aspects of buying into a business and wanting to work on it and seeing it succeed for you is just enjoying it and being all in, being passionate about it. So from your experience with your own businesses, as well as all of these that you're helping on Gusher, what maybe if you could give an example of one of your own businesses that you have most enjoyed, and then what aspects of either that business or other businesses, ones that you're working with, what components lead to that passion, that enjoyment, that fulfillment that really drives you?
First of all, passion doesn't come first. All right. So it's not the type of thing like you have a passion and you go after that passion. All right. Usually it doesn't. All right. So as I said earlier, like, I woke up, I was annoyed. I wanted a fucking blueberry muffin. I wanted something with carbs. It was more annoyance. It was more irritability that led to that creation of the company. Having passion, hey, it's great. Yeah, you're doing $50 million a year in sales. Yes, you have 3 plants. Yes, you're everywhere. And yeah, that's easy to go ahead and now feel psyched about it and doing everything else. But sleeping on a floor of a factory in the winter time is not fun. Driving around a frozen product in your car during winter time because you can't afford a reefer truck, which is a refrigerated or frozen truck, with your air conditioning on and windows open to keep it even more frozen, that's not fun. So I don't know if you have to be a masochist or what, but literally that 1% of good stuff, seeing it in a person's cart, getting a thank you, those little things for me, again, goosebumps, that for me is everything. That fuels me. So you don't get rid of that negative stuff. It's not like you're sitting there and going, hey, I love this and all flowers are rosy and everything else. No, I mean, 99% of it is bullshit and it's painful and it's a struggle. You have to get that other part, that 1% where you feel the success and you get what you need out of it. And if you're not getting anything that you need, that should have been a good answer to your question earlier. If you're not getting anything that you need, from a personal level, an intellectual level, or you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel or even a path or way to get there, it doesn't necessarily mean to stop yet. I'm not going to give that to you ever because I don't believe that. But that may be a good indicator,
Sure. Yeah, I hear you. Previously, I was with a business where we started a business that was focused on improving nighttime safety for older adults. And I remember one day we had a really long install at an assisted living community. It was the end of the installation, took longer than expected, probably rolled out over the course of a week. And it was the last day. We were exhausted. It was not our most successful turn of installations or implementations. But I remember we were going on the elevator down to leave the community, and there was an older adult resident and her adult daughter, and saw that we had our Luna Lights gear on and said something to us like, "Oh, you're with them? Like, my mom has been using this over the last couple nights and she's loved it." And then the older adult resident said to us, like, "You're like literally helping to save my life. This is wonderful."
Yeah.
And we walked out and we're like, wow, we were so down and exhausted at the end of the week. And that like a little piece was just, I mean, I still remember that. This is probably 6 years later to this day of like, wow, yeah, I guess we are really doing something worthwhile that's helping people. So I get it. Totally.
And it brings a smile. Look at you right now. It brings a smile to your face, Donovan. I mean,
Yeah.
you're literally smiling. I mean, I don't think there's anything better as a human being than going after that. And maybe it's hard, maybe it's difficult. It's not supposed to be easy. I mean, I'm thinking about my youngest son, who's 9 years old. He took up wrestling last year. All right. And, he's gotten really good at it in a short period of time. But that's required him to go through all these practices. It's required him to go ahead and have all these bad matches and all this other crap. But at the same time, yeah, he's won these tournaments. He's won these things. And that's enough to keep him going. I think it's the true for anybody. It's not that 99% of stuff. I wish it was more. Maybe it is. Maybe it's 80-20. I don't know. But there's a lot of crap that you have to go through just to get to that good place. And that good place to me is worth it every time.
So, Chris, obviously working on Gusher now, any other new
Sure.
companies in the works, or are you all in on Gusher currently?
I think I'm all in on Gusher, and that may be my last deal for a very, very long time.
Okay.
We're here just to untap as much human potential as possible and to create the greatest startup engine ever. That's why we are here, just to go ahead and untap that human potential. There's a need across the globe. There's a hell of a lot of people looking to start a business and keep running into that same scenario over and over, where they don't have capital, they don't have a way to make it happen. And I think back to when I was a young kid, seeing my mom stuck in a low-level job, had great business ideas and couldn't make it happen at all. And it took her well into her 50s until she finally made it. That stuck with me. And I think that's a worthy thing to go after with one's life. You know,
What did your mom finally make it with? What was her idea, or what
she
was
made
she?
it with a childcare. She opened a childcare center, which grew and grew and grew. She could have a chain of them, but by the time she really hit the money, she was happy with where she was at. She was making good high six figures, which was way more than she had ever made in any of her life. And I think that's a big accomplishment. You know,
Huge. So looking back on your 24 ventures, what if you could identify some of the mistakes you made through that process and what you learned from those mistakes? I think that will help some of our listeners to maybe avoid those pitfalls in their own journeys.
Although I'm sure one wishes all 24 were successful. I can't have to imagine there may have been a misstep or two along the way.
Well, I mean, here's the thing about the bad stuff, which as you get older, you push out of your brain, and even the bad stuff, you start reframing to become good stuff for some reason, the way your brain works. Okay. So I'm going to say this with a little bit of a grain of salt. So I think what you're asking is, hey, what the hell did you learn along the way that would save people a hell of a lot of time or problems or misery or whatever the hell it may be? Okay.
Exactly.
So there's a couple things that I would definitely do differently. First of all, I treated people just extremely poorly. To me, they were meant as a cog. They either served a purpose or they didn't. And I was a vicious player of people when it came to getting what I wanted. So meaning that I was there for the business only. You either fit it, you didn't, move on. I didn't give a crap about the people. Wow. Nowadays, I think just the reverse. The people are the actual assets. The way that you build up companies is not with a product or a service, it's with people. And those people I treat like gold. So to me, my team members are like family. I treat them just the exact opposite of what I did. And I think that it took having kids to really conclude that, because I was on the wrong path at an early age. Even though I was successful in business and had failures and successes and failures, really I was misaligned with the people element.
Real quick, was there a specific light bulb moment for you with that, or was that just development in your thinking over time?
I really think it came with the kids when I was holding my first child, North, in my arms, and I'm like, do you really want him to be like you? And I did not wish my life on anyone. And I didn't really understand how anyone could really do what I did in the way that I did it, meaning duplicate it. So was it teachable? Was it not? So I needed another way. And so that's when I started really doing it that way. And so I didn't come to that as in all one fell swoop. It was more of an evolution of having children. And as they grew, you just get better at it. So you just start treating people with the golden rule, which has been around forever. You know, treat people the way that you want to be treated and you'll be fine. But I want to leave one other bit of advice, which is the only thing they need for success. The only thing. All right.
Okay.
And I say this not lightly. It's huge, okay? And it's something that really I think people say kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say tongue in cheek, or they say it without the importance or the depth of knowledge. But when I say it, I mean it sincerely. This is the only bit of advice you need as a person starting out. This is what I say to my kids over and over and over again. I mean, almost nonstop, all right? You just never give up. Never, never, never give up. Never give up, and you'll get what you want. You'll get what you want eventually. You'll be where you want. And in that process of never giving up, you'll learn a lot about yourself. You'll learn a lot about the markets. You'll learn a lot about other people. But just the fact of digging in your heels All right. It's painful. It's brutal. It's not nice. It doesn't mean you have to be mean, but or turn into a brute, but it turns you strong. It turns you into something, a person that should be capable of reaching their dreams. But if you don't do that, you don't deserve to reach them in the begin with. If you don't pay that price, you don't deserve it. That's the price. You just don't give up. Never. I mean, never.
Chris, looking back at your background, for over 30 years, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been starting companies and running them. That could take over one's life. And I hear you're talking about your family. How do you manage the balance between work and your real life? Because that could be very challenging and tough to do.
Okay, so I don't believe in work-life balance, not at all, zero, nada. What I believe is the following. I was told by a business partner a long time ago with my first child. I said to him, I go, listen, I'm not the normal dad. I'm not a guy that goes, let's go to baseball games and hey, let's go see a movie and let's do whatever. I go, dude, he knew what I did, and that's all I do. I eat, breathe, and live this stuff. So he said this to me, and it had a huge impact. And thank God that he did say this to me. He goes, whatever you do, include them in it. You don't have to be a certain type of dad a certain way. You don't have to compare to other dads. Just include them in it. So I take my kids to pitch meetings. I take my kids when I travel on venture capital meetings. I take kids everywhere with them. So my kids, yeah, they can analyze a pitch. Yeah, my kids know how to start a business. They have started businesses. Yeah, my kids are great at what they do. Not everything, but I just teach them what I know because I don't know the other stuff. I try, but I don't know the other stuff. So I teach them what I know.
So it sounds like it's work all the time, and you include the family into the work. What do you do for
Well,
fun?
kind of,
How do you get away?
like, let me give you an example. When I talked about my child being a wrestler, all right, so I don't know what you know about wrestling, but for some reason, it's some weird political sport that is, I won't even go into crazy politics of it, but I've literally had to start a wrestling club. All right. So yeah, we got the place, we got the mats, we got the coaches. We said we're going to create a splinter group to do what they should be taught the right way. So I see stuff and I have to fix it. That's just the way I am. I have to create a better version of it.
So you said,
go ahead, Don.
I was going to say, you mentioned that your kids have started businesses. What are they working on?
Well, like, let me give you an example. So there's actually one that my child my 9-year-old's working on right this second. It's called Greasy Buns. So he wants to go ahead and has started it actually. So when you put hot dogs on buns, right? He's noticed that there's certain hot dogs that have more grease on them. And those are the hot dogs that he loves to go ahead and eat. So he wants to create that grease, that hot dog ingredient grease. He wants to bottle it. He wants to manufacture it and sell that as a product. Now, believe it or not, I started looking into this and I'm like, holy crap, this actually may have legs. So we start researching the hot dogs. We start reaching the base material. We start researching how to render. I start teaching him how to deal with a food chemist. So he's a 9-10-year-old. He's dealing with those conversations side by side. I'm not doing it for him. I'm telling him exactly what to do. I'm standing here to legitimize it. And yeah, I have to sign for him because he's not at the age of majority, but he's doing that deal. I kid you not. So we'll see if Greasy Buns or whatever the heck it ends up being called hits the market.
So have you found, is it like all beef franks that typically are greasier? Is it like what's the ticket?
Well, here's what we think, and we don't know the formulations of different hot dogs. Okay, so I don't want to say the brands, but there are certain hot dogs that have more of flavor. So you can look online and figure out like what the ingredient spices are. But our bet is really it's a function of the meat ratios and the way they're being rendered. So really, what is the grease in a hot dog? Well, what they do is they create this mash stuff, they grind it up, and then they put it in the casing and then turn it into a harder product by steam cooking it or flash steam cooking it. Well, he wants to go back to the base basically before it's pre-cooked and figure out where that essence is coming from. So we don't know exactly yet, but we have the food chemists on it. So, or a food chemist.
Chris, I will say a couple of weeks ago, I did finally make it to the Wiener Schnitzel in PB, and it was quite tasty.
Right?
I would assume you and your son are making a lot of Costco runs now.
Well, we've made Costco. Yep, absolutely.
Where's the
Right, on
where does the
research.
Costco hot dog rank in your hot dog and you and your son's hot dog rankings?
Well, as a business, I think it's phenomenal because it's a loss leader that generates a huge amount of business for them. If you've seen the case studies, it's amazing. But on the hot dog levels, not too high up there for greasy buns.
Okay.
So it's not one of our top contenders.
I don't remember the last time I ate a hot dog.
Dude, you don't need to eat the hot dog. Eat the grease.
Oh, that sounds much worse.
Well, hear me out. Well, you have all this healthy trend. The point is that, okay, you squeeze this grease on whatever it is, and you get that grease, man. That seems to be a thing. At least it is with 9-year-olds.
God. Okay.
Right?
I want to sign me up for
Trust
the
ya.
pre-order of greasy buns. I'm ready.
I'll send you a case free. Share it
out.
with Mike.
I'm out. So I know we're kind of running short on time, but before we let you go here, any final nuggets of wisdom you'd love to impart on our listeners?
Yeah, good deal first, money second. Do not put money into a deal. All right. There are ways to generate sales. There are ways to really validate that idea. There's so many ways to turn a base idea into money in the beginning stages. You do not throw your own money at it. You do not throw your savings at it. You only throw time. You do nothing else but time. But time is the most valuable thing you have. So make damn sure that it brings a smile to your face before you start down that road. And never give up. Never, 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 never give up.
Great advice. Well, let's on that note, let's call it a day. Chris, this has been very informative and a lot of fun. And I'll definitely be interested in seeing if your son's hot dog grease business takes off. And we'll be happy to help promote it. But
well,
thanks
thank
again.
you, or thank you on his behalf. And thanks for having me today, guys.
No, Gusher sounds like an awesome business, and best of luck on it. And
Thank you.
I think you've hit the our listeners that will definitely resonate, and hopefully that will drive some more leads for you there.
Cool.
So,
thank you much, guys.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you again.
Everybody got a dream, let me show you all love. From an idea, working it into a startup. This the show that you need, what more could you ask for? Never know who become the CEO next door. Tune in, every episode insightful. The type of vibe you will want to subscribe to. Let's go. Hey.